Hi everyone, I'm Nigel Balmer, Research Director at the Victorian Law Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to this Law Week event on legal capability. So you'll hear from me for a few minutes before I pass over to Donna and Chalita from Eastern CLC and my colleague Hugh MacDonald sitting on the end there. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of land, both here in central Melbourne and wherever our online audience may be joining us from. Here in the city, we're on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal Australians present today. Okay. Right. So, just by way of introduction, Hugh and I kind of like two things. We both really love data. I can't really see that slide because this giant speaker, but never mind. We both really like data, and we both love services that are tailored to needs and capabilities. Am I okay to walk this way? Yeah, all right. So we like measuring things in the hope that they might fit a little bit better. And this session is a great opportunity for us to collaborate with our friends here at Eastern, who we're both big fans of, who are using data to tailor to capability in a practical setting, which is what makes them particularly interesting. We know that people with justiciable problems or legal problems do a variety of things. We know this from legal needs surveys that Hugh and I have been doing for years. We know this from our public understanding of law survey that we're just analysing the data of now. They let you see what people do. Sometimes people come up against doors that are shut. Sometimes they find doors which are open. Sometimes those doors give them everything they need. Sometimes not. Sometimes they go to very unpromising places. New questions that we put into surveys such as PULS on legal capability, so the knowledge, skills and attributes you might need to navigate problems, allow us to ask questions about why people are doing what they're doing, when they're doing what they're doing, and hopefully new opportunities to think about tailoring to needs and capabilities, so why we're here today. Just to give you some brief findings from the survey, since I'm working with it at the moment, that's broadly what people do about problems right now. So we get around 40% of people, when we speak to them, have done nothing at all. We get around 16% have just gone to friends and family. About a quarter have got some sort of independent advice, and about 20% got some sort of legal advice. So the first thing you might notice from that is, well, that's a lot of doing nothing. All right. That's even more without independent help. So what we might have here is a lot of legal need. The answer to that is kind of yes and no. It depends what we think of as legal need. This is how I define it, myself, Pascal Pleasance and Pete Chapman. So I talk about legal need of whenever a deficit of legal capability necessitates support to enable a justiciable problem to be appropriately dealt with. It's unmet if it's inappropriately dealt with because that support was unavailable to make good a lack or deficit of legal capability. Legal need unmet means no access to justice, but you'll also note that legal capability is central to these definitions, which is kind of why we're here talking about this today. Why yes and no? Well, yes and no because not all legal problems mean legal need. Sometimes support's not needed. Sometimes they're too trivial. Sometimes there's no deficit. Sometimes the problem just began, etc. No, conversely, not all advice is necessarily good enough, so you can get legal advice and it might not solve your problem for you. But can we also use these surveys to get a little bit closer to this idea of legal need past just what people are doing? The answer is yes. So we can ask people, did you get all of the expert help you needed? And if you do that, regardless of what they actually did, these dark patches are the ones where people said, no, I needed more expert help. And if you put all of those together, we get a good chunk. We get about a third of these justiciable problems throughout Victoria where people are saying, I needed more expert help. So that's kind of a lot of unmet legal need. On top of this, who you are really matters. So over here on the right, we've got about a third of people saying I needed more expert help. And then you can see that percentage going up pretty dramatically where you've got people with long-term illness, disability, moderate or particularly severe mental distress, or where they're unable to eat, heat or cool their own home. So we're seeing socioeconomic inequalities becoming justice inequalities. But beyond who you actually are returning to legal capability, that matters too. So we looked at this as a number of ways in the survey. This is one of them. So this is what we call practical legal literacy, which I borrowed from health literacy, functional literacy. And the idea here is we're trying to capture the capability to obtain, understand, and navigate information and services that you might need to deal with these problems. So you'll notice we're not talking about legal settings because a lot of people haven't used them, but we can look at some adjacent settings such as banks, council, doctors, Centrelink, and we're seeing whether people have difficulties reading letters, filling out forms, understanding written information, communicating, etc. And if we take that simple measure of legal capability and categorize people as having no issues with practical legal literacy, minor issues, moderate or severe issues, you can see the more issues you've got with practical legal literacy, the more likely you are to say, I did not get the expert help I needed. So we're starting to see a powerful mismatch between what people need and what they're currently getting. So where does that leave you? Well, hopefully it leaves you thinking about doing something about it. So we can see legal capability is important. One size doesn't fit all. Not everyone needs or wants the same thing. So the question is, can considering capability in practice be better for clients? Can we make better use of scarce resources? We know that over-servicing is going to be wasteful. We know that under-servicing isn't going to resolve problems, might even create some more. But most importantly, if we try and do this in practice, how do we do it? How do we measure it? How do we refine a capability-focused approach? And that's kind of the point which I'll pass on to the talent in the room who are actually doing this in practice. So with us today, we've got Donna Askew, who's Director of Partnerships and Community Engagement at Eastern CLC. She's worked over a decade in legal assistance and government sector as a lawyer, educator, and project manager. We also have Cholita Granovsky, who joined Eastern CLC in 2020, leading their monitoring and evaluation work with a focus on quality of service provision, strategic and operational change. As I said, Hugh and I are a big fan of them and their colleagues at Eastern, who I think are doing some really innovative work. We'll also hear from my friend, Dr. Hugh MacDonald, who's principal researcher at Victorian Law Foundation. And those who know him will know that he's something of an international authority on all things legal assistance and access to justice. So with that, I'll pass on to Donna and or Cholita.
Thank you. Nigel? All right. So, thank you, first of all, to the Victorian Law Foundation for inviting us here to speak today, and also to the Law Institute of Victoria for hosting on this fabulous Law Week 2023. As you've heard, my name is Donna Askew. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Community Engagement. My pronouns are she, her. And I am very lucky to have 3 streams of work within the directorate that I lead, and that includes primary prevention and education, fundraising, marketing and strategic comms, and of course, frontline community engagement, which is our intake team. Our intake team is the one that undertakes this work. Okay. But before I begin, I'd also like to acknowledge that wherever we are today, we are meeting on First Nations lands that were never ceded, and I pay deep respect to elders past and present. And I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal people joining us here today. I'd also like to acknowledge the elders and Achos in Narms East, who we have the very real honour and privilege of listening to, walking alongside and working with, and more so now than ever, as we stand in solidarity as we lead towards voice, treaty and truth. Oh, now I just need to line up my slides with the things that I'm going to say. This is all very technical and very fancy, everyone, so I feel very, very, very lucky. So Eastern Community Legal Centre, we have a large and diverse catchment. We like to say we go from Hawthorn to Hillsville. We cover 6 local government areas, and that means around 900,000 people. So ECLC's vision is one of human rights, fairness and justice. We're a multidisciplinary legal service, and we work to prevent problems, progress fair outcomes and support the resilience of communities and community members in Melbourne's East. As you can see there, this is actually taken from our strategic plan. There are 3 pillars of the work: person-centred practice, people and partnerships. And it's within this plan that we aim to achieve our vision. And you can see there's 8 strategies that lead towards that vision. I'm not sure whether to look over here or look over here. I think I'll do what you did, Hugh. I'll look over here. And you can see there those 8 strategies. The 2 that we're going to be talking about today are making service pathways easier and also evaluating services. I should also mention that we have 8 priority communities who we seek to support and target services. Okay, so this slide I feel sums up a very, very long journey we have been on. And it is a journey that has touched all parts of ECLC's work and has seen a huge cultural shift in the organisation and the way we do business. And this could not have been possible without engagement from across ECLC, and our staff team are here today. For those that are in the room, say hi, everyone. You can chat with them afterwards. And I'd also, I think, as an important part of this work is to thank those that have supported us and acknowledge them, particularly the Victorian Law Foundation has been a huge partner and supporter, as well as Victoria Legal Aid. So this next slide, I have gone over this slide, I will admit, 9 million times because it's really hard to break down 8 years worth of work into one slide. So I'm going to do my best. I hope that you can bear with me because I will be doing a little bit of reading, but I really wanted to set the background and the context as to the way we've approached this work, which will feed into what Nigel and Hugh have been researching. So how did we get here today and why? So I'll take us back to 2015. So in 2015, as a centre, we realised that we weren't seeing the communities that were living in our region, particularly our First Nations communities, those from refugee backgrounds and those from culturally and linguistically diverse communities. The other problem we also noticed is that we didn't have a lot of data. We didn't have a lot of information about help seekers' needs in our region, particularly at the front line. So we put together a bit of a project plan and we applied for some money from Victoria Legal Aid and we established the Enhanced Entry Project, as you can see up there, with the aim to increase access to legal assistance for people experiencing marginalisation and complex needs. There were some aims of that project to deliver that outcome. Some actions to deliver that aim. And you can see them there. So develop and implement an enhanced triage framework, embed enhanced intake support in the way of a client advocate, so someone from a social work or community service background, and embedding evaluation for the first time in the front end of service delivery. And of course, which isn't up there, but I'm very sorry, I have neglected to mention establishing our intake team, our AIR team. So in practice, all of those words meant our focus was embedding an enhanced triage approach. And this was aiming to be person-centred and trauma-informed, opening up the dialogue with a help seeker, rather than asking the standard questions of where you live, what's your legal issue, those sorts of things. So we were trying to find out what's happening for a person, find out their strengths, but also some of the challenges they were experiencing. Alongside of that, and I'll have to be honest here, we had to have a good hard look at ourselves. We had, and I'm sure, there is always room for improvement here, but we did have a number of inflexible kind of organisational rules that had developed over time, which no one really kind of knew what that was. But I will give you an example of one of those rules, which was the 3 strikes and you're out rule. 3 strikes and you're out rule is not great for people experiencing complex needs. And as our client advocate pointed out very, very early on, they're the actual people that you should be trying to reach. And so we actually do things very differently now. And our senior intake team and our lawyers, particularly our managing lawyers, and also our client advocate will actively engage and try to reach that person, particularly if they've missed a number of appointments. Okay, so this also meant, as I mentioned before, a lot of cultural change. Everyone having to come on board with the evaluation journey. So we spent a lot of time supporting people and all parts of the practice and in all roles, all disciplines, to understand how we could better embed evaluation so that we can understand what our community members needed and actually if we were meeting those needs. So that project went along and fast forward to 2021. that COVID time is still causing some impact in my brain. But we were aiming to build on the findings of our enhanced entry project. And so during COVID, during a pandemic, we decided it would be a good time to take on one of those big findings. So the aim was to implement key actions from our enhanced entry project and also improve accessibility through digital technology. So that included developing multi-channel access points, call flows, which included particular lines for First Nations and interpreter lines. Also, for the first time, embedding post-call survey at the end of an appointment. And that survey component was utilising the technology that we had to hear from our community members and also do that in language. All right, so Shalita will talk a little bit more about that process, the contact centre and the data that comes from that. And finally, taking it to 2022, when we were very lucky to receive a grant of support from the Victorian Law Foundation to, again, further enhance our work, building on our intake approach and data capability support, and then share these findings with the sector, which is what we're doing today. So as you can see there, those key actions were develop a quality and capability framework from which we've had some great support from the researchers. Also engage with our community, continuing to find out what they need. Implement a Power BI, which Shalita will talk about more, and make some changes to class and also to our contact centre software to continue to improve our accessibility for community. That was a very long slide and I whipped through 8 years worth of work. So apologies, but we are around later on and there's some more information available, which will be available digitally as well. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the intake team and the process and the capability assessment as we understand it at ECLC. So our intake, as you've heard before, is guided by our quality and capability framework, which aims to identify and support the capacity of help seekers, those with less complex needs, to self-manage their legal issues with some referrals so that we're able to provide more intensive support to those who are experiencing more complex life challenges. Our intake team, as I mentioned before, they undertake that work in a conversational style, seeking to find out, are these people experiencing challenges? Are they from a priority community? And what are those intersectional factors that may be impacting on their ability to self-help or otherwise? The team, as I said before, is a multidisciplinary team. So that includes law students, lawyers, social workers, and also community service professionals. The team, to run this kind of approach, it really does take a lot of support. I think we're at almost 7 FTE possibly for the team, and that includes a manager and a team leader who provide lots of support to our intake team, as well as regular debriefing and support, because as I have said before, we are opening up the dialogue and conversations with our community members. The other thing we also do is we work really closely with the community law team and work particularly with the managing lawyers and also our client advocate, who also support our intake team members to do their capability assessment. So now I'm just going to show you a brief animation, which I hopefully can get to work. And this animation was developed in response to community feedback about expectations about when you call Eastern Community Legal Centre.
What happens when you call Eastern Community Legal Centre? After choosing option 1 for legal help, your call is answered by one of Eastern Community Legal Centre's awesome intake team. The intake team's job is to listen, assess, and connect you to the right legal help for your individual needs. Eastern Community Legal Centre's intake team are experts at helping you to find and access the right legal help. They are not lawyers, so won't be able to give you advice. After understanding more about your legal problem, They will connect you with the right lawyer or team at ECLC or refer you to the right service to help with your individual problem. Thank you for being patient with our team as we work together to help with your legal problem. Call Eastern Community Legal Centre on 1300 32 5200 or go online at eclc.org.au to see how we can help you.
All right. And thanks to our comms team for that short animation. They did a great job. So I'm just going to briefly talk a little bit more about our capability assessment and what the team used to support that. And so this is an extract from our intake form to guide our team members in understanding to work out whether someone's from a priority community, and also to find out what are some of the intersectional factors that some people might be experiencing, but also their strengths, understanding what capability people do have to navigate. And so you can see there a number of questions. Again, as I said, it's to identify interrelated social, legal and financial needs. So as part of, with that intake form, we also have some guided questions. As I said before, it's about using a conversational style to elicit what's happening for a person. So there are a number of questions there you can see, and I don't propose to go through them all. But what I will mention and touch upon is literacy. So really, it's not just about the ability to read and write, it's about functional literacy. So the ability to follow complex processes, fill out forms, and people's capacity to engage with the assistance that we're providing. So to pull this all together, this slide follows the help seeker journey from the front access point to an appointment with one of our legal team. So you can see there, if we follow the pathway, someone can self-refer, or they can, in the red there, they can be referred from an agency. They connect with us. If it's via the telephone, they'll connect with reception. They'll press 1 for legal help. That will then connect someone in with our intake team, who will be able to undertake the capability assessment. As with any legal service, we obviously have to do a conflict check. But once we've done that, and that's fine, then we have already established whether someone's from a priority community. If they're not from a priority community, you can see there they're referred out. And that referral out is, to a private lawyer or to the LIV referral service or an appropriate legal service for their needs. Then if we look a little bit further down, so we've identified that someone is from one of our 8 priority communities, and they may be able to self-help, but maybe just need some advice. So what we do then is we book them into our night service appointment, which is staffed by volunteer lawyers, lawyers from private practice and government, all sorts of volunteer lawyers, to provide that legal advice. If at that assessment point, as I said before, we identify if someone's from a priority community but experiencing lots of complex needs with less ability to self-help, we'll potentially refer them into 2 different pathways. So an appointment with our staff lawyer, who will see them during the day. They will also potentially refer them to one of our specialist wraparound services, who are usually involve having a lawyer, a financial counsellor and a social worker, particularly in the areas of elder abuse and family violence. The other option that the team have is to connect with the managing lawyers and also the client advocate. So the client advocate, as I said before, is from a social work background and works to support someone's access to even intake. So that might be building trust and rapport with a community member, ringing them, just building the relationship so that they will feel more confident to connect with us. Some of the things that the intake team will also do to make the most effective use of the time that they have prior to appointment. So they will make sure all the appropriate documents are with the centre so that when the person has their appointment, the lawyer is fully supported and ready to go. They'll also work out what the most appropriate type of appointment is, whether that be in person, online or over Zoom potentially. And they'll also talk about other things that help make the effectiveness of that appointment. So potentially talking to someone about childcare arrangements and travel arrangements, all of those things that helps make sure that the person at the time that they're ready to engage can actually engage effectively. So that's the journey from beginning to end. It's a lot of information, and I'm sorry I've had to whip through that very quickly because we also want to share an important part of this work, which was the data work, which has been a huge component. So I will hand over to Shalita to chat more about the data component.
Okay. All right. I love this quote. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So first of all, I'd like to say what a privilege it is to be here with Dr. Hugh and Nigel and Victorian Law Foundation, and to see such a great demand in the interest on this topic of building legal capability. So welcome to this exciting section on data. Hugh mentioned we love our data. We definitely do. My name is Shalita, and in my role as Principal Governance and Quality at Eastern Community Legal Centre, key focus is to empower and support the team in monitoring and evaluation practices, as well as building data capability to help inform person-centred, evidence-based service design and provision. As Donna highlighted before, evaluation of services is really paramount and is at the very core of what we do at Eastern Community Legal Centre. And understanding our why is fundamental. And we periodically ask ourselves the following questions. Are we achieving service and program objectives? How do we know the value and impact of what we do? Do we actually know which activities have most impact to the people that we serve? And how do we use our learnings to improve our outcomes? And asking ourselves those fundamental questions really helps us understand what data is useful, and not to collect data just for the sake of collecting data, but really it's about what are we doing with the data that we have available to help us make informed decisions and designing our services that are responsive, that are eliminating barriers right at that very first point of contact, that we understand why we are turning people away at those critical points in their engagement with the legal assistance sector, and how can we further strengthen our services in line with help-seeking needs. And it's important when we say person-centred practice that we do step back and really understand that it takes great courage for people to contact, to make that first point of call to the legal assistance sector, and to be there, to open that door for them, to be responsive, to build trust and rapport to the person engaging right at that very first point of contact, because that's the critical point where potentially they could disengage. And to help us better understand the communities that we are serving and where the gaps are, we are fortunate that we are supported by a contact centre platform which enables us to extract powerful insights in legal help-seeking trends right at that first point of contact. And through the dedicated phone lines, we are able to understand when people call us, what priority communities call us, which problem matters they call us with, and are able to then tailor our response at that first point of contact to the communities where interpreters are also available to assist in case there are language barriers. We are also able to extract real-time reporting to understand if there's, for instance, a government announcement or there's a storm response or disaster response. We are able to see the trends and then able to resource the team, the intake team, accordingly to better cater for the demand help-seeking needs. And importantly, we're also privileged to be able to issue and seek feedback following that initial point of call to really understand whether the person feels empowered, that they felt they are listened to, that they know where to go and to take that action. And it's really a team approach, as Donna mentioned before, that it's a holistic approach. That when people call us, it's not just about one problem matter. As Donna mentioned, there is a number of intersectional factors. And that's what the team does. It provides integrated, holistic support right at that very first point of contact, and really tries to elicit the help-seeking needs. And at times, the person may not even be aware of other needs, but we are there to support, guide, and provide that service at that first point. And what we've done is we've implemented a Power BI capability, which is essentially a business analysis and visualization tool that helped us to combine, collate, and multiple data sets from the contact center platform, from class, from survey feedback into a central dashboard, which I'm so excited about, which really provides meaningful insights as to the key metrics along the person's journey, and at what point are our services impactful and at what point are there gaps, so that we can use that data to inform continuous improvement and to ensure that we're collecting the right data set to inform the right service provision. And so that we understand ourselves if our services are accessible, are responsive, and truly meet help-seeking needs. So to give you a visualization, really, is around how we've collected multiple data sets. So we've connected our class data set, as well as various different survey feedback responses and any other data sets that are meaningful to paint a picture and address that story for us into a Power BI dashboard. And really, that really helps us to visually see where we are making a difference and where do we need to further collaborate with partners or stakeholders to bridge those gaps so that the referral pathway is seamless and smooth, particularly for the person. So with that in mind, it was important for us to test and trial the data, the administrative data, and see what we are collecting, and at what point of the person's journey, in order to inform the important questions of what is an effective and responsive person-centered service provision. So we stepped back and identified key metrics right from that very first point of contact and asked ourselves the question, what does a service that is responsive, accessible, and appropriate look like right from that very first point of contact? And that really helps us to really deep dive from a person-centered point of view, to step into their shoes, really identify where there are barriers so that we are able to elicit what is working well and what we can do better from the data we're collecting in a centralized data repository way. So just the highlighted metrics there, just some of the examples that we've added along this journey, whereby we've looked at referral organisations where people are referred from into our centre, and making sure that we are further developing and strengthening those partnerships as well. And also looking at how long do people wait from that initial inquiry right to the legal advice that they receive. So obviously that will impact on their experience. And that's very valuable insight for us to understand, so we can better resource our team accordingly. Follow-up callback required was also paramount in order for us to see the complexity and I suppose that above and beyond intake approach that we do at Eastern Community Legal Centre, whereby we follow up numerous times prior to the appointment being made with the person to make sure that that first appointment is as effective as possible, not just for the person that's having the appointment, not for the client, but also for the lawyer, to ensure that that session is as effective as it can be. However, with these data metrics, it's just scratching the surface. So we've just started on building this capability. However, there's so much more potential that we have on our hands, and particularly with the innovative tools that we have. The future is exciting, but more work is to be done. And to give you an example of some of the Power BI dashboards that we've created, and it's important to also flag that there's no point to combine a number of data sets if we're not asking ourselves the right questions that help inform a person-centered service provision. So for example, here we wanted to understand when are calls that relate to a particular problem matter received, so we are able to have the right resourcing from following a person's call, and making sure that we understand, we are able to correlate the calls in terms of peak times and days. When does that happen? Does it happen? What are the trends? Does it happen following a government announcement or particular incident or event? So for us, it's very important to look above and beyond the data to be able to understand the environment overall in order to help better cater for the needs that are coming through. We are also using our data at that front point of entry to inform our community legal education. So we're able to see what are people coming to us with, what problem matters they're coming to us with, and where are they located. So heat mapping capability really helped us provide tailored community legal education in the regions of where the demand is for that particular information. For example, storm response work, scams, elder abuse response and provision, family violence, etc. So that information really helps us to tailor our education for the priority communities in the areas of the demand coming through. And I love when data supports what we are seeing in practice. Intersectional factors, and Donna mentioned this as well, that we are seeing, particularly following COVID, a number of people presenting with multiple intersectional factors. And it is so important to have that holistic approach as we have at Eastern Community Centre, whereby it's not just focusing on one problem matter. The priority communities are now coming through with multiple intersectional factors, such as family violence as well as mental ill health. And it's important that we are there right at that first call to be able to assist in a responsive and appropriate way. And as Donna mentioned, in that case, we are able to collaborate with our managing lawyer as well as the client advocate as and when required. And here we can see, in terms of our service distribution, those people that are presenting with minimal or zero intersectional factors, we are providing that holistic, targeted, seamless pathway support to the right organisations, whereas people that are presenting with one or more intersectional factors, we are providing that more intensive, complex support through duty lawyer or other representation services. And here we can see that from the data coming through. And just an example, as I mentioned before, our storm response work has been largely informed by the data collection that we seek in the areas provided. So there's hubs that have been established and implemented in response to the help-seeking needs coming through following storm response, particularly on insurance and tenancy matters. And also, I just want to mention that the data coming through, it's also about asking ourselves, is it an issue with the service, or is it an issue that is systemic? Is it a systemic issue? And really collaborating together, not just within the centre, but as a sector overall, and asking ourselves the right questions with the data that we have available to us. we're also able to deep dive into the referrals, where calls are coming from, to be able to really understand that we have the right partnerships in place, and that where we are referring people to are effective and appropriate. And there's a lot more work to be done in that regard as well, and in closing the loop for that particular service provisions. So like I mentioned, we've just scratched the surface, but there's a lot more work to be done. There is a number of opportunities that we have in hand with the data that we have available and the innovative tools that we have now. I am really excited about the future and the capability and the innovative approaches that we can utilize at this point to really inform service design and provision that is responsive, that is appropriate, accessible, and really does meet legal help seeking needs. So if you would like further information on the work that we've done at Eastern Community Legal Centre, please scan the QR code and complete the form, and we'll be in touch with any information that you require. Thank you.
So thanks for that. I think we'll just hand over to Hugh for some brief comments before I open it to questions.
Yeah, we'll probably just have a bit of a discussion for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes. Obviously, you can do triage in a range of ways. Some services inundated with people from the general public striving really hard to get help, going everywhere possible. One thing some services do is go away. I don't want to see you. I have no capacity to meet your need. In fact, please just go away and try to find a service that might help you yourself. That's a feature of particularly some services in some other countries which don't have the benefit of a public legal assistance sector, and where there's tremendous need in the community. We have tremendous need in our communities. Most of the survey research will demonstrate that there are way more people that have legal problems that would benefit from having legal assistance than we have the resources and services to provide a service to them. So we've got this real problem around how we mix and match services using the resources we have, what type of services we provide, for what type of matters and to who. So I started, there's a number of ways in which you can do assessment and triage, but one of the things that I'm particularly struck with by Eastern is its genuine commitment to being person-centred, but also taking the time and the space to engage with people and listen to them. I've had the opportunity of listening to some calls and seeing the assessment and intake referral team in practice. Again, one of the most striking things about that is the warmth, the ability to really quickly build rapport, to demonstrate genuine interest in people, and taking the time and the space. So, Donna, was that a hard decision to make, to use some of your scarce resources to actually listen to people?
It was a decision that we felt we needed to take for our community. If we're not there for our community, what's the purpose of being there in the first place? So yes, it is resource intensive, absolutely. And we did have to spend a lot of time, balancing that. But I think, ultimately, when we stood back and had a look at who we were servicing and what was the best way to target our resources, using this enhanced intake and triage approach was a no-brainer in the end.
And you can see that. You're now, when you started talking, you said that there were sort of gaps in your services and some underserviced communities. Has that changed?
Absolutely. I think we have done we've done such a good job at establishing the enhanced triage and intake approach that it does mean actually there are impacts that flow down the line. So because we want to provide resources to those who have the most or are experiencing the most complex need, it does flow onto our legal teams who are then providing that support, that integrated support, particularly for those with really complex needs. So there is impacts, but I think at the end of the day, it is also about trying to achieve your vision. And our vision is of human rights, fairness and justice. And so to do this approach, you're opening up kind of the gateway to justice and aligning that with what you're seeking to achieve overall.
One of the things we look for in reform to improve services is sort of like an early investment to do better downstream services that are quicker, cheaper, easier. I was quite struck by what you were beginning to describe around the level of effort that goes into preparing the client to turn up for the first appointment. I'm sure anyone that's worked in legal practice would have the experience of a disorganised client turning up with a shopping bag full of papers and receipts, some of which are unopened. I can think of very clear examples the last time we had mortgage stress, where people would turn up with a whole range of unopened letters from a bank. They probably suspected what was in those letters, but if you don't open them, well, do you really know? Well, eventually when the sheriff comes knocking, it can lead you to open that letter. And unfortunately, one of the things that the research demonstrates is that people with lower levels of legal capability generally reach out for legal assistance late in the process. They have delayed help seeking, where if we had more accessible services earlier, we could probably get them to engage with services at a more timely moment when there are more options available for dealing with the problem other than handing the keys to your property back to the bank. So do you see that in the benefits, that first point of contact really is a valuable service?
Absolutely. And we try and make that first point of contact the most effective. We have a volunteer at our centre. Her name is Dilnaz, and there's probably a few who have met Dilnaz. She has a term that she uses, and that she says communities are not hard to reach, they're just hardly reached. And the onus should be on the organisation to create the spaces and systems that support people to access us. So investing in the front line, taking the time to really set up support and systems around that community member who's seeking help, so that we can then hopefully develop some more trust and engagement, so that appointment is the most effective it can possibly be, but also value for money-wise, most effectiveness of our service and our time.
Mm. People who know me probably heard me talk around outcomes measurement for a while. I've described outcomes measurement of the new frontier of access to justice and legal needs. In a theoretical sense, for intake, assessment and referral, ideally we would be able to triage, I don't know, like a doctor might or an emergency department might, triage people to a service which is evidence-based and proven and we know that works. So then as we're inundated with people seeking help and reaching out to communities in need, it's a process of putting somebody into the right service slot for them and having confidence that that service is appropriate and will be beneficial. And we might also build some safety net aspects into that. But Donna, I'm intrigued, and I always have been, which is why we talk a lot, around closing the loop on understanding what the outcome is, and then being able to match the service to get people into the right sort of service slot. So I'm fascinated by the insights that you're beginning to have in that path, and I'd be really keen to know what more you would like to know. Like, what would make a difference to you in the way that you design and provide services?
It's a big question. The closing the loop is an important one. Closing the loop, at the moment, we are able to get feedback from people post-call. And that person may not be receiving a service from us, but they have been put into a referral pathway. So at the moment, we're getting that feedback, and that feedback is quite positive on the whole. And Shalita can talk a little bit more about that. The next frontier, I think, to know 100% that what we have done for those community members who are referred out of our service, who are not less important, but who perhaps have that greater capability to self-help, is to close that loop on understanding. So what we would like is some resources. As I've said before, it is intensive, so that we can have team members who are able to reach out in a period of time post that referral to close that loop and find out, have we been successful in supporting them into the most appropriate service for their needs? Do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. And I think, well, definitely from the feedback that we're receiving following an intake call, we are, seeing such an important, I suppose, feedback where people are saying, okay, we do have the information, we know where we're going, we need to go to get help, but it's about then really understanding how effective was that help that we've provided. So we know what we know, but it's also as important to know what we don't know as well. And that takes a lot more resource. And that's where we are now, is that we've got capability, and now it's time to take that next step.
This will be an unfair question, but one of the things that services struggle with is, do I take the scarce resources I have and provide it on more lawyers providing more frontline services, or do I invest in more sophisticated understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it? Again, how did you guys come to the decision to invest in this sort of work in the first place?
As I sort of mentioned before, the community who we weren't servicing, who we weren't coming through our doors, was the obvious starting point. And I think you would have seen through when I talked about the strategic plan, embedding quality and knowing that we're able to hear from our community members and that our services are appropriate and effective. So I guess having those resources and putting them at the front end, but also a big part of this is not just resource, it's capability of the team members, so capacity building of the team members. So whilst we did get some grants, and it was a decision to put some of that to support our intake team, particularly with a team leader and a manager, increasing that capacity, it was also increasing the capacity of the staff members themselves to be able to do this work. And then over time, we have sought to build the capability of the team through hiring of different skill sets that apply different lenses to the work, so that we are able to, I guess, better support a community member at the point that they're ready to engage.
Yeah, so I guess we'll move on and invite questions from the audience. I think Jackie might be coming with a roving microphone, but if anyone has any questions.
I just wanted to ask whether the chat GPT or AI has impacted your service or the way people approach your service?
I would say that we are increasingly seeing people more confident to engage with our service using digital technology. I don't think we have seen an impact yet of AI or other sort of technologies. I think at the moment, community need in our region is outstripped. Our capacity is outstripped by the community need. So I don't think we have. What I do think is there is a potential to invest and think about those capabilities in future, what that looks like. Does that answer your question?
People try first to find the answers themselves before asking somebody.
Maybe Nigel.
Do you want to take that, Nigel, or I will?
Yeah, you go for it. I mean, we don't really know the answer yet.
Yeah, we don't really know, but we know that generally speaking, people go on a help-seeking journey. They will try everything. Some people may try Dr. Google. But we also know that people are not very good at framing legal searches, and they're not very good at even, at the moment we've got a real problem where if you Google certain things, it will return information for a different jurisdiction. And so we know people are not very good at picking their way through those first 2-3 search results. It might be that the search results for your jurisdiction are 3 pages deep.
I mean, those framing problems, some of those are starting to disappear now.
Yeah.
Like, so there was a whole bunch of research on specifically that, like, you know, how do we search for information? What are the errors people are making? But, you know, the world's changing very quickly. So,
and if you search for some things like I've got a money problem, the top of the search results are all payday loan people who will lend you more money to deal with your credit problem. So we've got a commercial aspect into some of these operations as well. Years ago, we reached out to Google to talk about the way that their search engine worked for some people. You know, we basically got in contact with them and sort of called them on their sort of motto, you know, do no harm. There's the potential there for the commercialisation of people seeking help, which privileges private money-making activities beyond some other public ones. And I think those exact issues are still issues yet to play out in as we see increasingly more AI and natural language processing coming into the way people search for information.
I'm just interested when you've talked about building the capability of the team. I'm just trying to grasp which team, because I'm interested in how have you built the capability of the legal team in terms of you've brought in this great stuff and engaged complex needs, and then how do the lawyers carry that through and continue to have those conversations, and using legal speak, how do they keep that story going?
I would say that, as I sort of mentioned before, it's been a whole of organisation. So all parts of the organisation, from the board, leadership, through to the staff, we've taken the time to bring everyone along the journey and asking our team members, what was it that they might need, or what do they need to better understand this approach? And as I said before, 8 years worth of work. We're much better now than we were in 2015. And we're continuing to learn. I think also having community voices in the feedback that comes through helps the team and also our legal team to know how our community is feeling and receiving services. We have got some of our lawyers. We've got our director here and our managing lawyer of legal services. But I would say that the most important part of it is building the relationships across your staff team and not having silos, so that our leaders from all parts of our team, so our intake team and our specialist programs and our community law team, meet regularly, so that we're having conversations about what we're seeing and also being honest about the impacts. As I said earlier, it is hard work, but again, lots of conversations across teams, and also the more multidisciplinary all of your teams across a legal practice really brings some rich conversations and dynamic conversations and different points of view. Obviously, you are working within the framework of a legal centre, but I would say those things have been paramount in our journey.
What type of cultural competency training do you offer your staff?
So we offer the staff team extensive training. So upon commencement with the centre, we provide a range of training. So supporting our staff teams around understanding family violence, elder abuse, also working with CALD communities, supporting our LGBTIQ communities, and a big focus of our work is obviously supporting First Nations communities. So connecting with our local Aboriginal controlled organisations and leaders who provide that capacity building to us. And it's not just a once-off, it's also very regular. And the other part of the training that has been a big feature of the work is understanding trauma-informed practice and the impacts of trauma. So we use a number of providers, but most recently it's been Blue Knot to provide some of that training. But also, I should also add to that question that because we have got a number of disciplines and disciplines in leadership roles, that has been a huge part. So our principal practitioners work alongside our lawyers. So that's been excellent as well.
So I think we'll draw the live feed bit to an end. Thank you to Hugh, thank you to Chalita, thank you to Donna, and thank you all for coming.